The shuttle was falling apart around Cole as he fought with the controls. Warning lights flashed red across every screen. The storm outside had come from nowhere, and now lightning cracked against the hull like angry fists. He pulled hard on the stick, trying to keep the nose up, but the engines were dying. Through the rain-covered window, he could see nothing but dark clouds and the occasional flash of green below. Trees. Lots of trees. He had been on a simple mission. Fly over the forest moon of 7, collect some readings, and return to the research station. Nobody had told him about the storms that could appear in minutes. Nobody had warned him that this moon was sacred ground to a species that wanted nothing to do with humans or anyone else. The left engine exploded, felt the shuttle spin, and he gripped his seat as the world turned upside down. He whispered a prayer to anyone listening and aimed for a gap in the trees. The ground came up fast, too fast. Then everything went black. When opened his eyes, he was hanging upside down in his seat. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. His body ached everywhere, but when he moved his arms and legs, nothing seemed broken. He was alive. Somehow he was alive. He cut himself free from the harness and fell onto what used to be the ceiling. The shuttle was destroyed. Smoke rose from the engines, and sparks flew from broken wires. Grabbed his emergency pack and crawled out through a crack in the hull. Outside, the forest was quiet except for the sound of rain dripping from leaves. The trees here were massive, with trunks wider than buildings and branches that blocked out most of the sky. Everything was green and wet and strange. Checked his communication device, but it was dead. Completely dead. He was alone on a moon where humans were not welcome, with no way to call for help. He spent the first hour checking his supplies. He had water tablets, some food bars, a knife, a fire starter, and a basic medical kit. Enough to survive for maybe a week if he was careful. He needed to find a river or a stream. He needed to find higher ground where a rescue team might spot him. Started walking. The forest was beautiful in a way that made him nervous. Flowers glowed softly in the shadows. Insects with too many wings buzzed past his head. He heard sounds he could not identify, calls and cries from creatures he had never seen. Every few minutes, he stopped to listen, making sure nothing was following him. After 2 hours of walking, he found a stream. The water was clear and cold, and he filled his bottle with relief. As he knelt by the water, he noticed something in the mud. Tracks. Small tracks with 4 clawed toes pressed deep into the soft ground. They were fresh, made within the last day or so. Knew about them from his training. They were a mammalian species, covered in short fur that ranged from brown to gray. They walked on 2 legs like humans but were smaller, with large ears and sharp teeth. They lived in family groups and were known for being private and suspicious of outsiders. The Galactic Council had tried to establish contact many times, but they always refused. These tracks were too small to be adults. They were made by children, cubs as they called them. Followed the tracks along the stream. He did not know why. Something in his chest, some feeling he could not name, pulled him forward. The tracks moved away from the water and into a dense part of the forest where the trees grew close together. Here, he found more tracks, bigger ones, predator tracks with deep claw marks that tore into the earth. His heart beat faster. The small tracks became messy, showing signs of running. The cubs had been chased. He moved quicker now, pushing through bushes and climbing over fallen logs. The trail led him to a massive tree with a hollow opening at its base. The entrance was dark, and he could smell something warm and alive inside. Dropped to his knees and looked in. 3 pairs of eyes stared back at him. The cubs were huddled together at the back of the hollow. They were small, maybe the size of human toddlers, with gray fur and ears pressed flat against their heads. They were shaking with fear. One of them let out a tiny whimper that broke his heart. He sat back slowly, not wanting to scare them more. He could see now that they were in bad shape. Their fur was dirty and matted. Their eyes looked dull, the way eyes looked when someone had not eaten or drunk water for too long. One of the cubs held its back leg at an odd angle and could see swelling around the joint. It was hurt. Thought about his situation. He needed to find rescue. He needed to survive. These cubs were not his responsibility. They were not even his species. Their family was probably looking for them, and if he stayed here, he might get in trouble with the... But he could not leave. He looked at those three small faces, at the fear in their eyes, and he knew he could not walk away. On Earth, humans had a long history of protecting the young, even the young of other species. Humans adopted orphaned animals. Humans built shelters for strays. It was something deep inside them, something that went beyond logic or survival. Opened his pack and pulled out a food bar. He broke off a small piece and placed it at the entrance of the hollow. Then he moved back and waited. The cubs did not move at first. They just watched him with those wide, frightened eyes. Minutes passed. Then the smallest cub, the one in the middle, crept forward. Its nose twitched as it sniffed the food. Slowly, carefully, it picked up the piece and brought it back to share with the others. Felt a small smile cross his face. He looked up at the darkening sky. Night was coming, and he could hear distant sounds that might be predators. This spot was not safe. The hollow was too exposed, too easy for something to find. He made his decision. Began gathering materials from the forest floor. Long vines that were strong and flexible. Strips of bark that peeled easily from certain trees. Broad leaves that could block wind and rain. He worked quickly but quietly, always keeping the hollow in sight. The cubs watched him from their hiding spot. They did not understand what he was doing, but they did not run. Perhaps they were too tired. Perhaps they sensed that this strange creature meant them no harm. As the last light faded from the sky, made a silent promise to the three small lives hiding in the darkness. He would not leave them. He would keep them safe until their family found them, or until he found a way to bring them home. He did not know that far away, in a settlement, a mother named was crying over cubs that everyone believed were already dead. He did not know that the elders had declared her children lost to the forest, taken by predators, gone forever. He only knew that tonight he would not let anything hurt them. Settled down near the hollow and began his watch. The forest grew dark around him, filled with sounds and shadows. But the cubs were quiet now, their fear slowly fading into something like hope. The human was staying. Woke before sunrise. His back hurt from sleeping against the tree, and his neck was stiff from keeping his head up through the night. He had dozed off a few times, but every strange sound had pulled him back awake. Now the forest was quiet, and pale light was beginning to filter through the leaves above. He looked toward the hollow and saw three small faces watching him. The cubs were awake too, their large eyes following his every movement. They had not run during the night. That was a good sign. Stretched his arms and stood up slowly. He made sure to keep his movements calm and predictable. He had worked with nervous animals before during his training as a... The key was patience. The key was showing them that you were not a threat. He checked his water bottle and found it nearly empty. The stream was not far, but he did not want to leave the cubs alone. He looked at them and then pointed toward the direction of the water. They just stared at him. Of course, they did not understand. They had never seen a human before. Sighed and made a decision. He walked to the hollow and crouched down, making himself as small as possible. The cubs pressed back against the far wall, but they did not cry out. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small metal cup. He showed it to them, then mimed drinking from it. The smallest cub tilted its head. Its nose twitched. Smiled and backed away. He walked to the stream quickly, filled the cup, and returned within minutes. When he held out the cup toward the hollow, the cubs did not move at first. Then the smallest one crept forward again. It was braver than the others, or maybe just more thirsty. The cubs sniffed the water and then drank deeply. Refilled the cup twice more until all three had their fill. When he pulled the cup back, the smallest cub made a soft chirping sound. It almost sounded like thank you. decided to call that one Pip. Now came the harder work. Looked around the clearing and saw that this spot was not good for staying long. The hollow was too low to the ground. Any predator could reach inside. The trees offered no protection if something big came hunting. He needed to build something better. Spent the morning gathering materials. He found vines that were thick and strong, perfect for tying things together. He stripped bark from trees that had soft outer layers, creating long, flexible sheets. He collected branches of different sizes and tested each one for strength. The cubs watched him the entire time, their eyes following him back and forth across the clearing. By midday, had chosen a spot between two trees where the ground was slightly raised. He began building. First, he created a frame using the strongest branches. He tied them together with vines, making sure each knot was tight and secure. The frame was shaped like a basket, wide at the bottom and narrower at the top. He lifted it off the ground and secured it between the two trees, about as high as his waist. Then he wove smaller branches through the frame, filling in the gaps. He layered bark sheets over the branches, creating walls that would block wind and rain. He lined the bottom with the softest leaves he could find, piling them deep to create a warm bed. When he finished, he stood back and looked at his work. It was a cradle made from vines and bark, hanging safely above the ground where nothing could easily reach. The cubs had moved closer while he worked. They were still nervous, but their curiosity was winning over their fear. Pip was practically at its feet now, sniffing at the pile of leftover vines. Knelt down and held out his hand, palm up. Pip looked at it for a long moment. Then slowly, the small cub pressed its nose against fingers. Its fur was softer than he expected. Its breath was warm. Felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tight and worried since the crash. He gently picked up Pip, moving slowly so the cub could pull away if it wanted. But Pip did not pull away. It looked up with those big eyes and made that chirping sound again, carried the cub to the cradle and placed it inside. Pip sniffed at the leaves and then curled up in the middle. Within seconds, it looked more comfortable than it had in days. The other two cubs watched this with great interest, approached them next, and though they backed away at first, they eventually let him pick them up too. One was slightly bigger than Pip, with darker fur around its ears. The other was the one with the injured leg and was extra careful when he lifted it. Once all three were in the cradle, checked the injured leg more closely. The swelling was worse than yesterday. The cub whimpered when he touched it, knew he needed to do something or the injury would get much worse. He found 2 straight sticks and some soft moss. Using strips of bark, he carefully wrapped the sticks around the injured leg to keep it straight. The cub cried out once, a sound that made his heart ache, but then it was done. The splint would help the leg heal properly. By evening, had improved the cradle even more. He added a roof of woven leaves to keep out rain. He created a small entrance that could be covered at night. The cubs had food in their bellies from the roots and berries had found, and they were clean from the gentle washing he had given them in the stream. As darkness fell, the 3 cubs curled together in their new bed, finally warm and safe, sat beneath the cradle and watched the shadows grow longer. He was tired and hungry. His own supplies were running low, but looking up at those 3 small lives, he could not bring himself to regret staying. He began to hum an old song, something his grandmother used to sing when he was small. The cubs' ears perked up at the sound. They did not understand the words, but they seemed to like the melody. Pip's eyes slowly closed. Far away, heard something moving through the forest. He tensed, his hand moving to his knife. But the sound faded, whatever it was passing by without finding them. What did not know was that the sound came from a young scout who had been sent to search the area, had seen the smoke from the fire made yesterday. He had followed the trail and seen the strange creature building something in the trees. He had watched from a distance, confused and suspicious. Now was running back to the settlement to report what he had seen. A human, A human in their sacred forest, near the place where 3 cubs had disappeared days ago. Elder would want to know about this. The elders had already declared the cubs dead. They believed that nothing could survive alone in the forest for so long. They believed that the predators had done their work. But now there was a human, and where there was a human, there was always trouble. Would send hunters to deal with this intruder. He would send them armed and ready to protect their sacred land. And in a small house at the edge of the settlement sat alone in the dark. She had not eaten in 2 days. She could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her 3 children running through the forest, heard them calling for her as the predator attacked. She had fought the beast with everything she had. She had driven it away. But when the danger passed, her cubs were gone, lost in the endless forest, taken by the wild. Everyone told her to accept it. Everyone told her that the forest had claimed them. But deep in her heart, a small flame of hope still burned. She did not know that her children were alive. She did not know that a strange creature from another world was singing them to sleep in a cradle made of vines and bark. But she would learn soon enough. The sun had barely risen when heard the hunters gathering outside her home. She had not slept again, and her body felt hollow from grief and exhaustion. But something in the voices outside made her push herself to her feet and open the door. 6 hunters stood in the center of the settlement, checking their weapons and speaking in low voices. Elder was with them, his gray fur marked with the white streaks of age. He was giving orders, pointing toward the eastern forest where cubs had disappeared. She walked closer, her legs unsteady beneath her. The hunters stopped talking when they saw her. "What is happening?" she asked. Turned to face her. His eyes were cold but not unkind. "Go back inside, this does not concern you." But had heard something, a word that made her heart beat faster. She had heard say human. "Why are you hunting a human?" she demanded. "What has a human done?" Sighed, he looked at the other hunters and then back at, found a human near the eastern stream. "It is building something in the trees near the place where your cubs were lost. We do not know what it wants, but we cannot allow it to stay on sacred ground." Felt the world tilt around her, near the eastern stream, near the place where her children had run when the predator attacked. A human was there. Her mind raced with terrible possibilities. Had the human killed them? Had it done something worse? Or was there another answer, one that she was afraid to hope for? "I am coming with you," she said. "No," replied firmly. "You are in no condition for this. You have not eaten, you have not slept. You will stay here where it is safe." "They are my children," said, and her voice cracked on the words. "If that human knows anything about what happened to them, I need to see for myself. I need to know." The hunters looked at each other uncomfortably, studied for a long moment, and something in his hard expression softened just a little. "You will stay behind us," he said finally. "You will not interfere. If there is danger, you will run. Do you understand?" Nodded, she would have agreed to anything. The group set out through the forest, moving quickly and quietly. Struggled to keep up, but she did not complain. Every step brought her closer to the truth, whatever that truth might be. Meanwhile was starting his 3rd day with the cubs. The morning had been peaceful. He had brought them water and found more roots for their breakfast. The injured cub's leg was looking better, the swelling going down. Pip had started following around the clearing, chirping happily whenever he came close. Was teaching them not to be afraid. He spoke to them constantly in a soft voice, telling them stories about Earth, about his family, about anything that came to mind. They did not understand his words, but they understood his tone. They understood that he was gentle and that he would not hurt them. He was in the middle of reinforcing the cradle when he heard something wrong. The forest had gone quiet. No birds calling, no insects buzzing, just silence. Stopped moving and listened. Then he heard it, footsteps, many of them coming closer. His first instinct was to grab the cubs and run. but he knew he could not outrun whatever was coming while carrying 3 small children. He could not hide them quickly enough. The only choice was to face whatever was approaching and hope for the best. He walked to the cubs and gently lifted them back into the cradle. He covered the entrance with a woven screen he had made, hiding them from view. Then he pulled the screen aside just enough to look Pip in the eyes. "Stay quiet," he whispered. "Stay still. I will keep you safe." Pip chirped softly, and his heart broke a little. Then he turned and walked toward the sounds. The hunters emerged from the forest like shadows. There were 6 of them, all armed with spears and blades that gleamed in the morning light. They spread out in a half circle, cutting off any escape. And at their center stood, his old eyes fixed on with suspicion and anger. Raised his hands slowly, showing that they were empty. He kept his voice calm. "I mean no harm," he said. "I am alone. My ship crashed during the storm." Stepped forward. "You are on sacred ground, human. You have no right to be here. What have you done? What have you built in our forest?" Glanced back at the cradle hanging between the trees. He could see the hunters looking at it too, their faces confused and wary. "I found something," said carefully, "something that I think belongs to you." He did not know how to explain. He did not know how they would react, but he had to try. Turned and walked slowly back toward the cradle. The hunters tensed, raising their weapons, but held up a hand to stop them. They watched as approached the woven structure and pulled back the screen. 3 small faces peered out. For a moment, nobody moved. The hunters stared in shock, took a step forward, his mouth falling open. And then a sound came from behind the hunting party, a sound that was raw and broken and full of hope. Pushed past the hunters before anyone could stop her. She ran toward the cradle, tears streaming down her face. Her children saw her and began crying out, reaching for her with their small arms. She gathered all 3 of them against her chest, pressing her face into their fur, sobbing their names over and over. They clung to her with everything they had, making sounds of joy that had never heard before. He stepped back to give them space. His eyes burned and he realized he was crying too. Approached slowly. His face was a mask of confusion. He looked at the cradle, at the splint on the injured cub's leg, at the shelter had built with such care. Then he looked at. "You did this," said. "It was not a question." Nodded. "I found them in a hollow tree. They were cold and scared and hungry. The little one was hurt. I could not leave them." "You are a human," said, as if that explained everything. Why would a human do this? Thought about the question. He thought about how to answer in a way that would make sense to someone who had never met a human before. "On my world," he said slowly, "we protect the young, all young. It does not matter what species they are. When we see a child in danger, we help. It is just what we do." Stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned to look at, who was still holding her cubs like she would never let them go again. One of the cubs reached out a small hand toward and made that chirping sound, the same sound Pip always made. Looked up, her eyes were red from crying, but there was something else in them now. Something that had never seen a show toward a human. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but it carried across the clearing like thunder. "Thank you for saving my children." Did not know what to say. He just nodded, his throat too tight for words. Looked at his hunters, then at the cradle, then at the human who had done something no would have expected. He did not understand this creature. He did not trust it, but he could not deny what his own eyes had shown him. The forest had not taken the cubs after all. Something had saved them. Something that was supposed to be a monster had shown more compassion than had thought possible. He had much to think about. "You will come with us," said two. "We have questions, many questions." Looked at the cubs still nestled against their mother. Pip was looking back at him, those big eyes full of something that might have been love. Smiled softly. "I will come," he said, "but please let me get my pack first. I have been treating the little one's leg. Someone will need to continue the care." Nodded once, then we go. As they walked toward the settlement, fell into step beside. She said nothing, but she stayed close. And when her children reached out toward the human who had saved them, she did not pull them away. Something had changed in the forest that day. Something that would change everything that came after. The settlement was smaller than had expected. Perhaps 50 structures made from wood and woven branches, arranged in a loose circle around a central meeting area. The buildings blended so well with the forest that he had not seen them until they were almost there. The who had stayed behind came out to watch as the group arrived. They pointed at and whispered to each other. He had never seen so many of them in one place. Young and old, tall and short, their fur ranging from pale gray to deep brown. They all watched him with the same mixture of fear and curiosity. But then they saw the 3 cubs in her arms, and the whispers turned to gasps. Watched as rushed forward to surround and her children. They touched the cubs gently, as if making sure they were real. Some of them cried. An older female pressed her forehead against and held it there for a long moment. He stood apart from all of this, not wanting to intrude. Stayed beside him, his sharp eyes never leaving his face. "You will wait here," said. "The council will speak with you when we are ready." Nodded. He sat down on a flat rock at the edge of the meeting area and watched the celebration unfold. The cubs were being passed from person to person, each wanting to see for themselves that they were alive and well. Pip kept looking back at, and once the small cub even tried to climb down and walk toward him before gently pulled it back. He waited for a long time. The sun moved across the sky. Someone brought him water, setting it down a few feet away and backing off quickly. He drank it gratefully. Finally returned with 2 other elders. They sat across from on stones of their own, forming a small circle. Their faces were serious. "Tell us everything," said, "from the beginning." So told them. He told them about his mission and the storm. He told them about the crash and his damaged equipment. He told them about finding the tracks by the stream and following them to the hollow tree. He told them about the fear in the cub's eyes and how he could not bring himself to leave them alone. He told them about building the cradle, about the splint for the injured leg, about singing his grandmother's lullaby while the cubs fell asleep. When he finished, the elders were silent for a long moment. Then one of them, a female with silver streaks in her fur, spoke. "We do not understand," she said. "Among our people, when young ones are lost to the forest, we do not search for long. The forest is dangerous. Many things hunt here. If the young are not found quickly, we accept that they are gone. We mourn and we move forward. This is our way." Considered her words carefully before responding. "Among my people," he said, "we do not give up easily, especially not on children. Our young are weak and helpless for many years after they are born. They cannot survive alone. So we evolve to protect them fiercely. And that instinct, it does not only apply to our own children. It applies to all young things. When we see a child in danger, something inside us demands that we help." "But we are not your children," the 3rd elder said. He was younger than the others with curious eyes. "We are not even your species. Why would you risk yourself for young that are not yours?" Thought about this question. It was a good question, one that he had never really considered before. The answer just seemed obvious to him. "I think," he said slowly, "that it is because we were once very small and very weak ourselves. Humans did not survive on our world because we were the strongest or the fastest. We survived because we worked together. We protected each other. And somewhere along the way, that protection grew to include others beyond our own tribe, our own family, our own species." He paused, searching for the right words. "When I looked into that hollow and saw 3 frightened children, I did not see cubs. I saw children who needed help, and I could not walk away from that. I do not think any human could." The elders exchanged glances. Could not read their expressions, but something in the air had changed. The suspicion was still there, but it was mixed now with something else. Confusion, maybe, or the beginning of understanding. From across the meeting area, a young approached. She was smaller than the hunters, with bright eyes and a cautious step. She stopped a respectful distance from the elders and waited to be acknowledged. Sira said, "What do you want?" The young looked at with open curiosity. She did not seem afraid of him at all. "I heard what happened," she said. "I heard what the human did. I have questions too, if the elders will permit." Sighed, but he nodded. Sira sat down on the ground, tucking her legs beneath her. She studied like he was a puzzle she wanted to solve. "You come from Earth," she said. "We have heard of your planet. Other species call it a death world. They say that everything there wants to kill you. The weather, the animals, even the plants. They say humans are the deadliest creatures in the galaxy because only the deadliest creatures could survive on such a world." Smiled a little. "Some of that is true," he admitted. "Our world can be dangerous. We had to be tough to survive there." "Then why," Sira asked, "are you so gentle with children?" Thought about dinosaurs and ice ages. He thought about predators with teeth and claws, about ancient humans huddling together in caves while storms raged outside. He thought about mothers who fought off wolves to protect their young, about fathers who worked themselves to exhaustion to feed their families. "Because that is how we survived," he said, "not just by being tough, but by being kind to each other, by protecting those who could not protect themselves. Our world was full of danger, but we faced that danger together. We built families and tribes and communities. We shared food with the hungry. We sheltered the weak. We raised each other's children when parents could not." He looked at Sira directly. "The galaxy sees us as, and maybe we are, but we are also something else. We are protectors. We are builders. We are the species that will cross a burning desert to save one child, that will fight monsters to protect strangers, that will give our last food to someone who is starving." He paused. "Being deadly and being gentle are not opposites. Sometimes you need to be deadly to protect the gentle things. That is what humans are. We are the teeth that guard the cradle." Sira stared at him with wide eyes. The elders were silent. Across the meeting area had stopped what she was doing to listen. She held her cubs close, and there were fresh tears on her face. Stood slowly. His expression was unreadable. "You have given us much to think about, human. We do not trust easily. Our people have been hurt before by outsiders who came with kind words and cruel intentions. But what you have done for children, that we cannot ignore." He looked at his fellow elders, then back at. "Your leg injury needs treatment," he said. "One of the cubs still needs care. You will stay with us until both are healed. Then we will help you contact your people." Blinked in surprise. He had not expected this. "Thank you," he said. Nodded once sharply. "Do not make me regret this decision." As the elder walked away, Sira scooted closer too. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "Will you tell me more," she asked, "about Earth, about humans, about the things you protect?" Smiled. "I will tell you everything," he said, "if you want to listen." From across the meeting area, Pip finally broke free from his arms. The small cub ran across the open ground and climbed into his lap without hesitation. It pressed its face against his chest and made that happy chirping sound. Wrapped his arms around the little creature and held it close. Some things did not need words. Some things were understood in any language. 3 weeks passed in the settlement and found himself becoming part of something he had never expected. Each morning, he woke in the small shelter that had given him. Each day, he spent time with the cubs, caring for the injured one he had named, whose leg was healing well under his attention. They watched him constantly at first. They followed him when he walked through the settlement. They listened when he spoke. But as the days passed, the watching became less suspicious and more curious. Some of them began to approach him with questions. How did he make the splint? How did he know which roots were safe to eat? Why did humans cook their food over fire? Answered everything as best he could. He showed them how to clean wounds and stop bleeding. He taught them how to build shelters that stayed warm even in cold nights. He demonstrated the technique he had used to weave the cradle, and soon several young were practicing with vines of their own. Sira became his constant companion. She asked more questions than anyone else, and she was never satisfied with simple answers. She wanted to know about human history, human families, human dreams. Found himself talking to her for hours at a time, sharing stories about Earth that he had not thought about in years. Visited him every day. She rarely spoke, but she always brought food. Real food, carefully prepared. At first thought it was just politeness, but Sira explained that among the sharing food with someone was a sign of deep trust. It meant you considered them family. Did not know what to say when he heard that, so he just ate the food and tried not to cry. The cubs grew stronger under his care. His leg healed completely, the splint coming off to reveal a limb that moved as well as ever. The other two cubs, whose names learned were Myra, and followed him everywhere like small, fuzzy shadows. But Pip was the most attached. The smallest cub slept in shelter most nights, curled against his chest like a child seeking warmth. On the 18th day, finally managed to repair his emergency beacon. The signal went out into the sky, a tiny pulse of hope reaching toward the stars. He did not know if anyone would hear it. He did not know if anyone was looking for him. But on the 21st day, the rescue shuttle arrived. Heard it before he saw it, the roar of engines breaking through the quiet morning air. He ran to the edge of the settlement and looked up. A small ship was descending through the clouds, bearing the markings of the human research station. They came out of their homes to watch. They had never seen a human ship up close before. Many of them looked frightened, but they did not run. Stood at the front of the crowd, his old face calm but watchful. The shuttle landed in a clearing just outside the settlement. The engines powered down and the door opened. Two humans in uniform stepped out, their eyes wide with shock. Cole, one of them said, "You are alive. We thought we lost you in the storm." Walked forward to meet them. He was aware of the watching behind him, aware of three small cubs pressing against his legs. "I am alive," he said, "thanks to friends." The rescue team looked past him at the crowd of alien faces. Their hands moved toward their weapons, but stopped them with a gesture. "They are not a threat," he said firmly. "They saved me. They welcomed me into their home. You will treat them with respect or you will leave without me." The team members exchanged uncertain glances, but they lowered their hands. Elder stepped forward. His voice was strong and clear. "Cole has lived among us for many days," he said. "He has shown us things we did not believe possible. He has proven that not all outsiders come with evil intentions. We are grateful for what he has done, and we will remember it always." He turned to look at directly. "You came to our sacred ground as a stranger. You found our lost children and protected them when you could have walked away. You built a cradle for them from vines and bark. You sang to them in the darkness. You are not what we expected humans to be." Felt his throat tighten. "I only did what any human would do," he said. Shook his head slowly. "No, you did what a good person would do, and perhaps that is not so different after all." Came forward carrying something in her hands. It was a small carving made from wood, shaped and smoothed with careful attention. Took it and looked closely. The carving showed a human figure standing tall, with three small cubs gathered at its feet. The detail was remarkable. He could see the kindness in the human's face, the trust in the cub's eyes. "My children made this," said softly. "They wanted you to remember them. They wanted you to remember that you are family now, no matter how far you go." Pressed the carving against his chest. Tears rolled down his cheeks, and he did not try to hide them. "I will never forget," he whispered, "never." Pip ran forward and threw small arms around his leg. The cub was crying too, making that chirping sound over and over. Knelt down and hugged all three cubs one final time. He breathed in their scent and felt their small hearts beating against his. Then he stood and walked toward the shuttle. Each step felt heavy. Each step took him further from something precious. At the door of the ship, he turned back. Sira was standing at the front of the crowd, her bright eyes filled with hope. "Will humans come back?" she called out. "Will they come in peace?" Smiled through his tears. "I will make sure of it," he promised. "I will tell everyone what happened here. I will tell them about the who taught me that kindness exists everywhere, even in the places we least expect." He climbed into the shuttle. The door closed. The engines roared to life. And as the ship rose into the sky, looked down through the window at the small figures waving below. 6 months later, the Galactic Council received an unusual request. The who had refused all contact for generations were asking for human observers to be stationed at their breeding sanctuaries. They wanted humans specifically. They wanted the species that had proven themselves capable of protecting children that were not their own. The council was stunned. The diplomats were confused. Everyone wanted to know why. The ambassador, a young female named Sira, delivered the answer in a speech that was shared across 1,000 worlds. "We believed that humans were monsters," she said. "We believed they were who brought only destruction. We were wrong. A human taught us that strength and gentleness can live in the same heart. A human showed us that protecting the vulnerable is not weakness, but the greatest kind of courage." She paused and held up a small wooden carving for everyone to see. "We no longer call them," she said. "We call them cradle builders, and we are proud to call them friends." On Earth, Cole watched the broadcast from his family's kitchen. His grandmother sat beside him, the same grandmother whose lullaby had comforted 3 frightened cubs in a faraway forest. She held his hand and smiled. On his shelf, the wooden carving caught the morning light. 3 small figures and 1 tall one, bound together forever in wood and memory. Thought about Pip, about Myra and Anne. He thought about tears and respect and Sira's endless questions. He thought about a cradle made from vines and bark, hanging between 2 trees on a moon sacred to a people who had learned to trust. Humanity was many things. They were survivors and fighters. They were explorers and builders. They were stubborn and reckless and sometimes foolish. But above all else, they were protectors. And the galaxy was finally beginning to understand.